Last week, I know you guys covered some of 38. My good friend Jim came in, and I was very appreciative of his time, his effort. He always does a great job. It's probably a thorough reminder that he is very good at preaching and has done a lot of it. And I am still very much working my way toward understanding even some of it. So I'm very, like I said, I'm always so thankful I have good friends I can call on who love the church, who love church planting, as Jim does, and loves the effort that it takes to gather together and to be faithful to God's word. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the pages of Exodus are growing very, very thin. In fact, we are down to the last 2 chapters. And so this week we're going to be covering 39. Now, if you guys are reading along at home, which I hope you are, I hope you're taking some time throughout the week just to read the passages ahead. And if you haven't, you should definitely go ahead and take advantage of the last chapter. I mean, if you haven't, go home, read 39 and 40. Because there's some things I'm going to point out today, but I want to encourage you. We can't cover all of it, which is too much. There's just a lot in there. But I want you to read some of it and see what strikes your mind, because what's interesting here is we're getting into the space. This is the last thing that is being done to complete the tabernacle. Like, to complete all the things, that the last thing that's left is the priest. So the building's been built, and the ark has been built, and the tables and offerings have been built, and the curtains have been built, and the posts that they sit on, and the ropes that they're tied down with. All of these things have been created, and now the last thing is the priest. The robes, the garments, the ephod, all these things are being created at the very end. And there's some things here that I want to point out along the way today. We'll go through bits and pieces because we're not going to try to tackle like the whole chapter. It is 40, I think something like 42 verses or something. So I'm going to highlight some parts. But as we look at this, I don't want you to lose sight of like the last piece is this priestly piece. And one of the things that I think is interesting in my life that I've always noticed is that I want you to keep this part in mind. When God first called Exodus, he called them to be something specific. I don't know if you guys, it's not in there, so don't look for it, John. I already know he's looking. When he was calling them, though, he said that you would be my own nation, and I will make you a nation of priests. And I want you just to let that resonate as we think about the fact that here we're going to see just a group of people set aside. And why that might be. We'll hit it at the end. But I just want that to begin pondering and rolling around in your head. Because God's initial intent for Israel was that all of the people would be a priest. That was his intent. He said, you're going to be a nation of priests. The whole nation is going to be priestly. Now, I think that would probably help as we understand what are priests called to do. What are they? And you'll see that, and I think the text helps us a little bit with that today as we go through it. And so as we hit these spots, I hope that you'll get a little more clarity, and then that'll help us maybe understand what's happened. So the chapter opens up with verse 1, as they all do, apparently. So, except for 1 or 2, but this one opens up with verse 1. It says, they made specially woven garments for ministry in the sanctuary, and the holy garments for Aaron from the blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And so they begin this process of making ministry garments. These garments are special for going into and out of the tabernacle. Now there is something to be said, as we've talked about throughout this process, and we've talked about one of the first things we recognize is how ornate the Ark of the Covenant was. Right? It's made out of blocks of gold, basically, a chunk of gold hammered out into a shape. Even the angels and how delicate they were, they weren't attached. They were a block beaten into the shape of angels. So this thing is, 1, heavy, 2, incredibly ornate, like intricate. And there's this idea that's being built around this, like being set aside, like being set up somewhere special. When I was a kid, as you can imagine, I was often referred to as a bull in a china shop. Even today, china shops make me nervous. We went to one not long ago, and I was like, I don't like it here at all. But there is a reality of like, I'm a large man and take up a lot of space, and sometimes you lose your proprioceptive understanding, which is a fancy word for you don't know where you are and you hit things. Okay? And I remember all of my, I have a friend when I was growing up, and his family he was a single child, and he was not as rambunctious as me. And I would go into their house, and all of their fancy stuff would be like displayed up. And it used to crack me up because I was like, I don't think we had fancy stuff. And I asked my mom one day when I came home, I said, hey, why don't we have our fancy stuff up? Do we even have it? Are we destitute like that? Like, are we poor? And we weren't rich. I was like, are we poor? She goes, no, we have it. I just keep it in a box. I don't trust you. I can't put it out. Your kids will break it. I was like, oh, okay. And that's when I realized, like, this idea of being set, like you keep your nice things, you set your nice things up, right? Like, you would hope that you have a home where you can set your nice things up, but there's times where you have to protect it, right? And there's a reality of all of this is being set up in a way where this is a special set-aside space. And why is it? Because God's presence is going to be there. Remember, they've had a tent of meeting. Like, remember, Moses had to move God out of the middle of the camp because they were so hard-headed. They were so stubborn, as God called them, stiff-necked. And he's like, I can't be there because these people they will not, like, I cannot be in their presence. So Moses moves the tent that was already there where he met with God. He moves this tent out of the middle of the where the tribes were settling. He moves it out of the camp. God's bringing this back. He's bringing his presence back, but he's like, hey, there's some parameters here. We're going to put up a nice glass shelf, okay, because you guys clearly can't be around my nice things, right? You're going to break everything. Last time I gave you any freedom, you made a calf. So I'm going to help you out. We're going to make sure you understand this is holy and special and set aside. And so all of these things are going to be considered holy. And when I know if you're super churched up, holy is like a weird concept, but all holy means is something set aside. It's something that's special. It has a special meaning and a special purpose. It's set aside for this. Whether it has a purpose, whether it's like a functional purpose, or if it commands some type of authoritative purpose, but it's set aside. It has been set on a special place. All of these things we're about to read are essentially telling the people of Israel, like, this is what it looks like if you want to be in my presence. The reason that these ministers are wearing these robes is not because the ministers are special, it's because God is special. And I think that's the part we have to understand. You can't just approach God. Like, they were so terrified, like they wouldn't even want to approach God. They tried. God was like, come up the mountain. He's like, no, we're terrified, and let Moses do it. Like, send him up there as the sacrifice, because we're terrified he might kill us. And so there's this reminder for these people that God is holy. Like, he's called them to be set aside. That they're supposed to have a change, and so he uses this outward expression of that. The chapter continues on, and he starts with what's called the ephod, which if you're from southern Jerusalem, it's ephod, but if, you know, and that's a joke because it's not. It's just, I've always heard of ephod. I thought that was what's called my whole life. And turns out I'm just a redneck and don't know how to say things right. But the ephod is, the ephod is part of the garment. It's going to be basically the robe, if you will, is going to go on. And so, chapter 2 picks up here. 2 through 4 says, Bezalel made the ephod of gold or blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and a finely spun linen. And they hammered out thin sheets of gold, and he cut them in the threads from them, and interwove them into the blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and the fine linen, and a skillful design. And they made shoulder pieces for attaching it. It was joined together as its two edges. It keeps going, but we're going to pause there. And you see Bezalel is making the ephod for them. It's made out of linen. It's made to be attached. All right, it's going to go on. And he's making this specifically for a specific purpose. But the part I wanted to get you to is actually in verse 7. And this is what it says in verse 7. It says, He fastened them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as memorial stones for Israelite, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. One of the things that he had to do, and it tells us here, is that there was these onyx. Well, they say onyx. A lot of these stones we don't know, so just heads up. You'll hear people preach on like all the colors, and like half of them are extremely highly debated. We just don't know. It's kind of like the whole gopher wood thing. Like we don't really know what that is per se. We think we do, but we don't know. And to be honest with you, it's silly to argue about. We just know they're stones, and they were pretty. And some have colors, and some didn't, and we don't know all that. But they do know that these stones were surrounded, and they were engraved, and each one of them was engraved with one of the Israelites' tribe names on them. And then he says that they put these on the shoulder piece of the ephod as memorial stones. Now, that's a weird way of saying this, but you've heard this word before, Ebenezer. That's what the word actually is, Ebenezer. And these are stones of remembrance. And it's interesting because each one of them has their name chiseled into it. And one of the things I want to point out, and you're going to see this not just here, it's going to be repeated. And we talk about this, how like important, when things are important, they get repeated. You're going to see this repeated over and over and over again. This idea that the ministers are going to be carrying upon them these stones of remembrance. Over and over again. They're going to have the names of the tribes on them, etched into them, and they're to carry them. And one of the things that I think it's important for us to remember is, like, these ministers' jobs were to minister on behalf of the Israelite people. They were to never forget the whole point of what they were doing was for the Israelite people. See, one of the things that priests do, that they were called to do, was to be the interceder between God and his people. They were the go-between. They were the mediator. They were the intercessor. They were taking the people to God and God back to the people over and over again. That's what their job was. And so it's important that you remember your job and who you're serving. These priests weren't priests because it was cool. They were priests because they were to serve the Lord as they served God's people. And that's what their job was. The passage is going to continue. And the next piece that they make is the breastpiece. There's a picture of it behind me. We think we know what those are. We don't. Those are not accurate. So you can look at it and observe it, and some of it's fairly accurate, but at least half are highly debated. Like, a lot of people have very strong opinions about what it means. So I would just caution you, if you read something, it's like, oh, this means this, and it has all these meanings. I'm like, I don't know, and neither do they really. We're just making guesses. We just are. We didn't live then, so we don't even know what some of those rocks are. But nonetheless, it's beautiful. It gives us a great idea of what the chest plate would look like. And this chest plate would go onto the ephod. So we're going to read a little bit about that. That picks up in verse 8, and we'll just read 8 through 10. It says, he also made the embroidered breastplate with the same workmanship as the ephod of gold, of blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and the finely spun linen. And they made the breastpiece square, folded double, 9 inches long by 9 inches wide. And they mounted 4 rows of gemstones on it. This breastplate was elaborate, to say the least. They list all the things that they do there. And each one of those stones is going to represent the 12 tribes. So now we've already got on the shoulders, there's rocks with their tribes' names etched into them as rocks of remembrance. Now we have it on their chest, these rocks of remembrance. And this pure gold breastplate. And one of the things that I think is important for us to understand is the priests were also meant to carry the burdens of their people. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever worn clothing and you have something just pulling on the front of you, that is uncomfortable. And last time I checked, gold's not like lightweight, it's not like heavy, but if you put a plate of gold on you, that's going to be pulling at you all day. It's not comfortable. This is not a good, comfortable way to do it. But there's a reality of what the priests were called was to bear the burdens of the people. They were to carry their problems, to carry their worries, to carry their concerns, to carry and minister according to what their needs were. That was part of what a priest's role was. To take those burdens to the Lord. To remember them. Over and over again. We're going to skip part of the passage to get to the next passage. They spend a lot of time talking about these rocks, by the way. They spend like 12 verses just talking about the rocks that are there. But then we go into the section about the robe. These are the robes that they would all wear. And this robe would be for all of the priests. All the priests would get to wear this one. Not everybody would get to wear the breastplate, but all the priests would get to wear this particular part. And this starts in verse 22, and it says, they made the woven robe of ephod entirely of blue yarn, and there was an opening in the center of the robe like a body armor, which a collar around the opening, so that it would not tear. And they made pomegranates and finely spun blue and purple and scarlet yarn on the lower hem. And they made bells of pure gold, attached the bells between the pomegranates, and all around the hem of the robe between the pomegranates, a bell and a pomegranate, alternating around the lower hem of the robe to be worn for ministry. And they made it just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So we see this whole robe that's being etched. And the big thing that they focus on is pomegranates and bells. Like, it's just a lot of that repeated multiple times, so you know that there is fruit and bells on this thing. Now, they really want you to know about these bells and these fruit. Now, there is a lot of people who have mentioned that the bells served a functional purpose. And this bell purpose, one of the things that was mentioned, now God doesn't explicitly say this, but it's definitely part of what the Jewish people believed, is that the bells were on the ephod for or on the robe part of the ephod for a very specific purpose. And that was when they had an opportunity to enter into the presence of the Lord. If they stopped hearing the bells, then clearly that guy died. That was their biggest concern. They were so appropriately fearful of God's presence that they knew that if a man would go into God's presence unprepared, that he had not fulfilled the appropriate cleansing that needed to happen in order to fulfill that function, if he were to walk into the Holy of Holies and stand before what the Bible tells us is the glory of God, he would die. He could not withstand the presence of the Lord. And so many have believed that the bells served for this purpose. That was the main purpose that they felt like it served. I've heard very similar things along the lines of a rope that was considered, the same way, had bells on it as well. But this is one of the things we can assure ourselves about, that one, that there was a distinct understanding and a very much awareness that God is not some type of small, piddly God. He's like no other God that they have ever known. And they lived in a land of gods. Egypt has hundreds of gods. Remember, we're not that far from Egypt. It's taken us longer to read the book than it has for the amount of time that has happened. And that's kind of crazy to think about. But these people grew up in a land of gods, and there was no God like this. So terrifying, so overwhelming, so powerful, so good and glorious that his very presence could remove life from you, could take your own life, because he was the giver of life. It seems for us, many of us, we struggle to comprehend. I don't think that's one of the things that I think many people miss, is this: there is a healthy fear of the Lord in these Israelite people. Not because God is angry. When we think about fear, I always think one of the things we think about is like an anger, rage kind of thing. Like the things we fear are things that are dangerous, right? But the reality is we fear a lot of things, and we just don't even think about it. We fear things that are uncertain. We fear things that are chaotic. I think one of the things that we have to understand is this is not a small God that we serve. This is the God that created the grandest of things we can understand. I got to go see the Blue Ridge Parkway literally yesterday. That's a grand view. It's overwhelming. It's just a lot of stuff. And I love it. I've seen it hundreds, maybe thousands of times. I've spent 6 years just there, but it doesn't matter. It's still breathtaking. I've stood in the Grand Canyon and looked down and go, that's crazy. And to think that that is just a small place on a slightly larger piece of land, on a rock floating through infiniteness. And a God who made all of that, who doesn't even exist within of that, he's outside of all that. And I was like, we have the audacity to ask questions and to think lightly. We don't have this fear, this awe that should just overwhelm us, that God could be that amazing and large and overwhelming. But these people did. But don't worry, they continue to make things. The chapter continues into verse 27. He said, they made the tunics of fine woven linen for Aaron and his sons, and they made the turban and the ornate headbands of fine linen and linen undergarments of finely spun linen, and the sash of finely spun linen, expertly embroidered with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. And they did just as the Lord commanded Moses. And so they made all the priests cool garments. Everybody got an undergarment. And it was for, notice who he said it was for. He said it was for Aaron and his sons. We'll get into more of that detail next week as we kind of close out Exodus. But what you're going to go ahead, I'm going to ahead at least kind of ruin the end, I guess. God is going to set aside Aaron and his sons as specifically priests serving. And that'll be the thing that they do for the rest of their lineage. That's what they're supposed to do, is to protect and watch over the tabernacle, to devote their whole life, everything in their life, to who God is. And then they make one more last piece. This is called the diadem. In verse 30, it says, they made a medallion, a holy diadem, out of purple gold, and wrote on it an inscription like an engraving on a seal, holy to the Lord. And they attached a cord of blue yarn to it in order to mount it on the turban, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Here we see the last piece of work done is this little diadem. In fact, verse 32 will read this. You can jump to it real quick. It says, so all the work of the tabernacle, the tent of the meetings, was finished. That's the end of the work. They finished all the work. And the last thing they finished is this diadem. And I love it because it's the last piece that makes it complete is holy unto the Lord. And it goes on their little turban thing they're wearing, which is funny because if you read on church history, they changed the word turban because they didn't, we had the whole thing with the Muslims, so they were like, we need to change that from turban to something else. They've put bonnet, which is interesting. But at the end of the day, like, all of this work is, and to me, like, this is the last piece, and the very last thing that says all of this is holy unto the Lord. Not just the priest's garment, all of it. Everything that they've stitched is holy unto the Lord, set aside for God. This is Yahweh's stuff. It's kind of like a little signature that you put on the end of the painting. Right in a little corner, you'll find like this is all set aside for God. All this labor, all this effort, all this stuff. In fact, if you want to go home and read it, you can, because I will not. I've read it multiple times this week. But the next 15 verses are all the things they made. Starting in chapter 32 down. It's all the things they made. And list them out. Saying that they made them. And how did they make them? Holy unto the Lord. They're set aside for Yahweh. All their work, all that time spent. Bezalel has been super busy, but not just him. All those who were able, right? Here's what's interesting as I was reading this. Is if you go through there is one thing that is overly it's mentioned every passage. Like at every break, it's mentioned. Every time that there's a space, it's mentioned over and over again. And it is it's this phrase. It starts in verse 1. John, you're going to have to jump with me, so just hang tight, buddy. I'll give you some time. But it's this phrase. It's just as the Lord has commanded Moses. It shows up 8 times. 8 in this chapter. It's pretty important if it shows up that many times. And it says over and over again, just as the Lord has commanded, just as the Lord has commanded, just as the Lord commanded. That they completed this just as the Lord has commanded. And it's something really important that I want to point out. As I was thinking about this and processing through what we've talked through over the last couple weeks about this idea of like a portable presence of God, right? And then last week, you guys talked about the idea of the burnt offerings and the basins and like taking worship with you. And as I was trying to understand like this whole thing, last week, they're being led by God. One of the things that we have to understand is that we're not always going to understand. We're just not. Like, I promise you, I cannot imagine what was going through their heads when they're building this last bit out. Like, some of it makes sense. Like, the Ark of the Covenant is super important, right? God's box is gold. Cool. God likes a gold box. Cool. That makes sense. Angels on it. Dope. I like some cherubim anyways. It looks nice. Right? Got to rope this thing off. Got to put some curtains up because it's God. Like, we're going to catch on fire or something. We don't know. Right? Everything's made out of gold and wood. Man's got good taste. God's got some great taste. So far, they're there. Like, they got the altar where they have to sacrifice. Yeah, man, we just did Passover. Like, we got to have like a fancy place to do it. We got to have the right kind of place. We got a little lamp in here because it's dark, right? Like, it's probably dark in there. We got to have a lamp. What about the showbread thing? Well, I mean, we had the bread. We had to eat the bread didn't have yeast in it, so we had to have the bread. Right. What about the priest's garments? What do you mean? Well, it's got to have a breastplate. What? Well, what kind of breastplate? Made out of gold. It's going to have a gold breastplate. Like, is it arm? No, it's going to have rocks in it. Pretty rocks. Oh, okay. Why? Why do we need all that? I don't know. And the reason I point this out is, like, sometimes we have this thing that we fight with. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I fight with this. I want God to tell me, and I want to understand it all. I need him to tell me the whole plan. I need to know exactly what he's going on, because it's hard for me to commit if I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like, I want to know how this is going to work out. And part of it might just be that earthly nature. Some of us have this where we just want to hedge our bets here. Like, we like to win, so we want to make sure we do win. That might be it. I don't know. But I know that there have been more times than not, God has rarely given me all the information that I would like to know. He's just like, I need you to do this. It doesn't make any sense. I didn't ask it if it made sense. It just said, you need to do it. To me, this part of the passage just screams that at me. Like, I mean, I couldn't help. Like, I thought we were all going to be a nation of priests. Why do we got these special priests now? Why does he get to wear the cool chest plate? Why is that chest plate so uncomfortable? Why does he get a cool turban? Like, why are these things? And they don't ask, they just do it. It says over and over that they did as the Lord had commanded Moses. One of the most baffling places, and probably, well, I'll say this, one of the most revered men in all of the Bible, especially to the Jewish people, is Abraham. There's a lot of reasons for this. Sometimes it's because they look at the covenant with Abraham. But more times than not, when you talk to people who've studied, especially Jewish people with Jewish background, and you've studied the Bible, and you look at Abraham's story, there are two places that just seem outrageous to me. And both of them are about obedience. Abraham, first encounter with God. The first time God talks to Abraham, he says, hey, Abraham, I'm going to need you to leave. I'm going to give you a land. But I need you to leave, pack up everything, and I need you to leave. What's wild to me, and should really catch our attention, is there is no direction. There's no, it's going to be over here. There's no, it's going to take this long. It's just, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to make a nation out of you. Out of your loins is going to come a nation. It's going to be so many of them, it's going to fill the sky. There's going to be more children than there are stars in the sky and sand on a beach. That's how many children you're going to have. And Abraham, at old age, right? They're real kind about it. They're like, he was past the age of reproduction. Approximately, I don't know, like 70-ish, 80s. There's arguments over how old he was. He was older than you would expect a man to have a child. More importantly, his wife was older than she should have a child, and she was barren. And yet they believed. They did it. Did they do it right? No, of course they didn't do it right. They screwed up a lot. Abraham is like a whole story of screwing up. But he still did it. He still did it. One of the things we can learn from this passage is God's desire, like right worship is about obedience. It's not about, hey, what song we sing today. And it's not about, hey, like we had an awesome slideshow today. Right? It's not about how cool you are, what kind of shoes you have on. It's not about, did you dress super nice today? It is literally about obedience. Just over and over and over obedience. And I know obedience in America is like a dirty word. We hate that word. We're like, you can't tell me what to do, America. Right? Like, we can't stand it. We hate obedience. I have a child at home. Like, he is the most defiant young man, and I love him to death. I do. And I know God is going to do some amazing things through him, but good Lord, he drives me nuts. Like, can't you just do it? No. Unfortunately, it's probably mostly for me, because I'm the same hard-headed child like that. And I know God, just like, that's what he does like 90% of the time. He just looks at us and goes, hey, at some point you're gonna get it right. Thank the Lord, he is so gracious and patient with us. But this is such, and I want to point to this because I think it's so important. This is such a contrast to what happened on the other side of this story. Because this isn't the first time that we read, like, we didn't read a ton of it. We just kind of went through it because I knew we would come back to it. But remember that what happened right before the tabernacle is the golden calf. And what happened right before that is God telling Moses that the people were going to make the tabernacle. If you go read chapter 25 through 31, it is the exact same thing we've been reading, word for word in places. God is telling Moses, this is how I want the tabernacle to look. I want you to make these curtains, and I want the ark to look like this, and I want the priest to wear these robes. And then Moses comes down the mountain, and they're worshiping a golden calf. This is the next thing that happens, is that they now are obedient. They're obedient. And they're obedient with not having all the information. They don't know what's about to happen. They don't know what it's going to look like to have priests, because they don't have priests. They don't know that. They don't know why God is doing it this way. They just know that this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be obedient. And God is trying to build into them, into their culture, into this nation, the idea of worship and right worship. Because all they know is wrong worship. All they know is the worship of idols. So God is trying to show them. And this is what happens. This is what I love. Is because when we are obedient, this is the results of. We get a picture of what is the result of these Israelites and their obedience. And that's the last two verses here, right? 42 and 43. The Israelites had done all the work according to everything the Lord had commanded Moses. And Moses inspected all the work they had accomplished. And they had done just as the Lord commanded. And then Moses blessed them. We cry out all the time about, God, I need a blessing. God, if I hit one more theme, read or thread on the internet about, like, I just need a blessing, or I hope God blesses me with this. And unfortunately, we live in a culture where we like a certain kind of blessing. We want to be blessed in a very specific kind of way. But understand this, our greatest blessing is going to be the presence of God. That's the blessing. His presence. Because if he is with us, who can be against us, right? You know what Paul says? Right? If God is with us, nobody be against me. If God is with me, then I am the recipient of all the things that God is. And God is good, just, faithful. I have all the fruits of the Spirit, which means I can be kind and gentle and patient, joyful, slow to anger. Those are the blessings that God has promised us. And we're obedient. That's the reward. And if we don't have those things, then we're not being obedient. Obedience is going to look different for everybody. Most of us aren't going to get a call like Abraham. Like most of us aren't going to be like, hey, I need you to leave everything and go somewhere. That's just the reality. That's not going to be the majority of people. That wasn't the majority of people in the Bible. It was one guy. But obedience is a call for all of us. For all of us. We are called to be this. You and me, everybody. We're called to obey God. It doesn't mean that, and I'm not talking about the rule book. I'm not talking about you breaking out your 10 commandments and like trying to make sure you got your behaviors. I'm talking about something far more greater. I'm talking about an obedience of going where God has called you to go, being where you're supposed to be, worshiping in every form and fashion that you are. One of the things I think Jim mentioned last week, we talked about it briefly, so I think it is, but if it isn't, we're talking about it now, is that the Israelites never knew how long they were going to be set up, right? They had to follow where God was going. And if it moved, they moved, and if it didn't, they didn't. That's obedience. And that's the thing that I want to challenge you guys with. I'm not trying to get you to behave more. I'm not trying to get you to act like you got all your stuff together. No. What I'm telling you to do is you need to be going where God is telling you to go. And you need to stay where God is telling you to stay. You need to be faithful. And I'm not talking about like life changes here. I'm talking about like, hey, where is God in your workplace? Where is God where your children are? In your home? With your friends? In your recreation? Like, is he a part of that? Have you ever asked him to be a part of it? Have you ever invited him into some of those spaces? Because that's what we're supposed to do. The whole idea of the portable presence of the Lord is the fact that he goes with you. And everywhere you go is worship, which means everywhere you go there's obedience being asked. Maybe it's just sitting with parents, even though you don't want to because you're tired. But sitting with them anyways and trying to have a conversation. Maybe it's inviting a friend over to do a project with you. Not because you need the help, because you know they need to be there. Maybe it is something deeper, getting involved in a homeless shelter with some type of activist group, whatever it is. I don't know. I can't speak for what it looks like. I just know you should, whatever it is. And quit asking why. Quit asking because you need understanding. And just ask, how do I do this? How do I be faithful? I'm going to have our team come down as we close in worship today. That's my challenge to you this week, is begin seeing what God is doing in your life. Begin looking for those places where God's calling you to be obedient, to serve him. To bring worship and his presence into every space, because that's what he wants to do. We'll spend some time. We're getting ready to jump into Ephesians. I'm going to have so much fun in Ephesians for most part. But we're going to look at some of these things about what does obedience through the New Testament looks like. But I'll be honest with you, it's not going to be much different. We're going to be asked to do things we don't understand for an uncertain amount of time without specific measurable results. Because that's what it looks like. God's not judging us on whether the world thinks we're successful. He's only judging us on our faithfulness. That's what he looks at. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you.